A brand new asphalt scenic lane sloughed into my cattails like warm frosting and vanished beneath a roaring midnight tide. By sunrise, frogs were sunning themselves on a mangled stop sign. The HOA president stood on my porch with a clipboard and said, "You owe us for road repairs." I pointed to the herons skating past on chunks of asphalt and replied, "Lady, your road is currently migrating south." My name is Marcus Hale, quiet homeowner, weekend kayak guy, owner of 7 identical flannel shirts. I moved to Alder Marsh Estates in Willowfen Shores because I like hearing bullfrogs instead of leaf blowers. Enter Deardra Oke, HOA president, hair the color of litigation and a smile that says she laminates emotions. She decided our community needs connectivity and greenlit a shortcut to the pool directly across my deeded wetlands. I explained easements, hydric soils, and the concept of do not. She explained fines, bylaws, and we have already contracted a crew. They arrived at dawn with gravel and confidence. Deardra called it Phase 1 Marsh Mobility. Her compliance posse filmed me while a backhoe chewed up cattails and a teen with a reflective vest posted a sign that read HOA Road No Parking No Kayaks with 2 question marks. I got violation letters for obstruction of community progress, standing water accumulation, and truly malicious amphibian encouragement. She even sent a letter stating I was in violation of the HOA aesthetic standards because the natural wetland grasses were over the approved lawn height limit of 4 inches. When I pointed out that wetlands are exempt from lawn regulations, she created a new rule on the spot that said exemptions do not apply to areas designated for future community improvements. The construction crew seemed confused when they hit water at 6 inches deep. The foreman asked Deardra if she was sure this was the right spot, and she snapped that she had been president since before he was born, which was clearly false since he was at least 50. She instructed them to just add more gravel until it stops being wet. They dumped 16 tons of fill into what was essentially a sponge with federal protection. The gravel disappeared like sugar in coffee. She ordered more. 28 tons later, they had something resembling a road if you squinted and had never seen an actual road before. Then the sky did its summer in Florida impression with sheets of rain and wind like gossip. The road swelled, buckled, and slid into the water table. An SUV tried it and had to be rescued by a gentleman with a John boat and a Labrador named Soup. The next morning I woke to a certified letter stating the HOA billed me $38,940 for damages to shared infrastructure caused by your swamp. I framed it next to my duck decoy. The audacity was breathtaking, really. They had bulldozed through protected wetlands without any permits, destroyed a natural ecosystem that had existed for decades, and when Mother Nature reclaimed what was hers, they had the nerve to send me the bill. Deardra even included an itemized list that featured asphalt removal at $15,000, equipment rental at $8,000, and my personal favorite, administrative oversight fees at $3,500. I wondered if administrative oversight meant watching from her golf cart while sipping a latte. I filed a quiet complaint with the County Environmental Office, the State DEP, and because I can read a map, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Deardra, sensing a narrative problem, called the sheriff claiming I sabotaged the road with clandestine water. The deputy stared at the marsh like it had personally wronged him and left. 2 days later, the Corps showed up in waders, flipped through permits which there were none, and taped a notice of violation to the HOA clubhouse door. Deardra argued that wetland is a vibe. The inspector's eyebrow achieved low orbit. She tried to rally the neighborhood with an emergency meeting where she presented a PowerPoint titled Our Marsh, Our Rules. The slides included clip art of happy ducks and a graph showing property values that had nothing to do with anything. When I stood to present aerial photos showing the destruction, she cut my mic and announced that only board members could use visual aids. The crowd started murmuring when I held up my phone showing the federal wetlands map with our neighborhood clearly marked. Someone in the back yelled, "That is literally a protected area, Deardra." She responded by announcing a 15-minute recess that lasted 45 minutes while she made frantic phone calls in the parking lot. The calls did not go well based on what we could hear through the window. She kept saying things like, "But we are a private community and surely there must be an exemption, and I have been president for 12 years. When she came back inside, her perfect composure had cracked just enough to show the panic underneath. She announced that our legal team, which was actually just a brother-in-law who did real estate closings, assured her everything was completely fine and that federal overreach would not be tolerated in Alder Marsh Estates. Half the room looked at their phones where local news alerts were already popping up about the environmental violations. Someone asked if we should maybe get actual environmental lawyers, and Deardra snapped that she did not appreciate the negativity during this challenging but ultimately victorious moment. The next 3 days brought a parade of official vehicles to our neighborhood. First came the state environmental protection officers, who spent 6 hours documenting the damage with cameras that probably cost more than my car. They measured water flow disruption, cataloged dead vegetation, and took water samples while Deardra followed them around with a clipboard, insisting they needed HOA permission to be on the property. One officer finally turned to her and said, "Ma'am, this is a federal investigation. Your permission is not required." She responded by taking photos of his badge number and threatening to report him to his supervisor. He handed her his supervisor's business card and said, "Please do. She would love to hear from you." County stormwater folks traced the HOA illicit fill straight into protected habitat. Fish and Wildlife cited them for bulldozing a chorus frog breeding site. State DEP issued an emergency restoration order and froze the HOA accounts pending fines. Meanwhile, my lawyer filed a countersuit for trespass, nuisance, and a request for injunctive relief that translated to stop paving the swamp. Deardra attempted an emergency assessment to pay their legal bills, but the bank rejected it under the freeze. Suddenly, neighbors who once applauded marsh mobility were asking why their budget line now read regulatory catastrophe. Embezzlement, and she shouted that after 14 years of service she deserved some consideration. A homeowner in the front row said, "The only thing you deserve is a prison cell for what you did to those wetlands." Deardra threw her gavel at him, missed, and shattered the memorial plaque for the neighborhood's founder. The police were called, again, and she was escorted out, again, but not before announcing she would be running for re-election because the bylaws did not specifically prohibit candidates under federal investigation. At the special hearing, I rolled a cart with 3 exhibits. Exhibit A was my survey and deed. Exhibit B contained drone photos of the backhoe amphibian massacre. Exhibit C featured the HOA-owned newsletter headline reading, "Alder Marsh tames the bog," next to Deardra cutting a ribbon in stilettos. The judge did not even sip his coffee before granting the injunction, ordering full restoration, and converting their lawsuit into a boomerang. The Corps announced civil penalties per day, per square foot, and the room learned new math. A TV crew captured Deardra giving a speech about heroic infrastructure while a raccoon stole a caution cone behind her. It went viral instantly. The federal prosecutor stood and read the charges with a voice that could freeze water. Willful violation of the Clean Water Act, destruction of protected habitat, filing false statements to federal agencies, conspiracy to circumvent environmental regulations, and wire fraud for misappropriation of HOA funds. Each charge carried potential criminal penalties, including prison time. The judge asked Deardra if she understood the severity, and she replied with a trembling voice that she was just trying to improve the neighborhood. The prosecutor presented evidence that she had received 3 written warnings from environmental agencies over the past 18 months, and had told witnesses that federal regulations did not apply to private communities. Her own emails became the most damaging evidence. One to the contractor read, "I do not care if there are endangered tadpoles, pave over them." Another to the board stated, "Federal agencies have no jurisdiction over our private property. Ignore any notices." The worst one was to her brother-in-law attorney, where she admitted knowing the area was protected but figured the fines would be minimal and could be passed on to homeowners through a special assessment. The prosecutor also revealed she had taken kickbacks from the paving company totaling $42,000, deposited across 6 different personal accounts to avoid detection. When confronted with the bank records, she claimed they were consulting fees for project management, but could not produce any consulting agreement or tax documentation. When the verdict came down, the courtroom went silent. Deardra Oke was found personally liable for $287,000 in restoration costs, $95,000 in civil penalties, and faced 18 months of supervised probation with 300 hours of community service, specifically cataloging amphibians with the local middle school. The HOA itself received fines totaling $460,000. She stood there with her mouth open, her face cycling through shades of red I did not know existed, before collapsing back into her chair, saying this cannot be happening over and over, while her lawyer tried to explain that yes, it absolutely was happening.